Thanks for joining me here.
Hey, Bobby, we're
Bobby.
excited to be here tonight.
Very happy to be here with you.
Well, thank you. So let's jump into this topic of kids and technology. Why don't you share a little bit about when or what age and why you allowed your children access to personal devices as opposed to a community family computer?
Well, to be fair, what we had at the beginning was a personal family computer. And we were just talking about this actually, about how the iPhone, or as we call it, a smartphone, really came onto the scene about the time our kids were the ages that we said they could have a phone. And so that kind of created some complications, because I've said before, you don't know what you don't know. And so at the time, we thought it was just the logical progression. So we had set an age of 10. So we said 10 years old is when our kids are going to get a phone. Now, we didn't take any consideration into whether or not this was a phone or an iPhone or a smartphone. And we certainly didn't understand at all what we were getting into when we equipped our kids with an iPhone.
Well, that leads us right into my next question, Mark and Ann. Did you set up any parameters around the privilege of them having these devices?
I think you said in the beginning of this interview, didn't he say that we've made every mistake
yes.
in the book?
That's pretty much everyone.
Okay, that was our first
did.
one.
Yeah.
Because again, we just thought it was a phone. I mean, I'm going to be the first one to admit right here in front of you, that I had an iPhone for 2 years before I had a single app on it other than the app that came from Apple.
Wow.
Okay? So I wasn't using the phone except for anything but a phone. That's it. I didn't send text messages. I didn't use apps. I just knew it was the next progression of a phone. So again, when it came time for our kids, or we thought an age to have a phone, we gave them a phone. Now, I don't think it's going to be any surprise to you or anybody else. The kids figured out it was more than a phone really fast. So for a lot of reasons, none of which I'm really proud of, knowing what I know now, we handed our kids a personal computer and we thought it was a phone. And therefore, in the very beginning, we didn't have very many restrictions. We didn't have very many restrictions about when they used it. We didn't have very many restrictions on how they used it. And I'm a little embarrassed, actually, as a parent, to admit how little we invested in learning what it was we were handing our kids at that point in time. And if I can say this, we paid a price for it. We paid a price as a family. We paid a price in our relationship with our kids because we didn't take the time to learn what it was we were handing them. And so, sadly, Bobby, we didn't have a lot of parameters around our kids. And honestly, I think we wish we would have.
Oh, yeah, we've learned.
Absolutely.
There are lots of different parameters that, you're able to set with them now, and it's important to do it, stay up to date with all of them.
Yeah, and I know that you guys obviously do the contracts and pay portions of the bills and stuff, and so that's obviously part of the learning curve.
Well, okay, so, that's where we ended up. So, in all fairness, when you ask the question of did we have parameters in the beginning, the answer is no. Now, as we went along, we started saying, this isn't working. Like this is going to really hurt them. It's going to hurt our family. And so one of the things that hit us was we can't have a phone without signing a contract with AT&T or Verizon or Sprint. But we didn't have any agreement with our kids at all. And when we sat down and thought about that, we thought that was kind of foolish because we didn't have a contract. We didn't have an agreement. So we sat down and we created a contract for the phone. And that helped. Okay, that really helped. But then later, which has been more recently, we started saying to ourselves, wait a minute. Our kids don't have any skin in the game. They've learned how to adhere to the contract, but do they really have any skin in the game? Do they really understand how expensive this is? And is it a privilege? Is it a responsibility? And so only recently, Bobby, did we start making them actually help pay for the privilege of having their phone, and only at a certain age. I mean, it's got to be age appropriate in that regard. Not all of them are contributing the same to their phone. But here's the deal. We've got some kids right now. Okay, we got 6 teenagers. At one point in time, we gave them all phones at 10 years old. Okay? We have kids right now, older teenagers, that do not have a phone.
Wow.
Okay? Now, that's partly because of the parameters we put on the phone, but it's partly because we started making the responsibility of having a phone their responsibility, which is also the financial responsibility of having a phone. So if they're not willing to contribute financially, then it makes no sense for them to have a phone. And that's something I know I wish we would have done in the beginning.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, I know that, we had a lot of our members talk about how it's so easy for their kids to disengage from the community, their family communities, due to technology. They entertain themselves so much easier with that technology, and through social media, they keep in contact with people outside of the family. What advice would you have about managing that with your children?
It's a good one, and we've been really rolling up our sleeves on this.
We have. There's a few different things that we do. One of them is make sure you're engaging with them in their phone. Check it. Who are they communicating with? Check their apps. They have this whole world outside of us that's kind of hidden and private, and it's scary for it to be that way. And making sure you know what they're doing, who they're talking to is really important. So I would say don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and look. The other thing is that we've used a number of apps that help to monitor, also help to limit time. The one that we use currently is Custodio, which I think you actually introduced to us.
You did, Bobby.
And it's been wonderful because it's actually not just a tool for us to help them and to know what they're doing and see where they go online and on their social media apps, but also for them for time management, because they're able to see, oh wow, I spent 4 hours on Instagram today. How did I do that? That was a lot of time.
My favorite thing is that Ann sat down with the kids the other day, a couple of them, and said, so how many hours do you think you spent in the last week on the phone? And specifically, she called out a few apps. How many hours do you think you spent on, say, Instagram? And they gave an answer. Their answer was about 1/10 of what they actually spent. Now, she knows that because she's monitoring it. She can see it. But I got to tell you, the coolest part was it yielded some awesome conversation. And that's really what we're finding, is that if we can talk about it, if we can teach them about using this piece of technology, then we're doing something right as a parent. Even if we're getting some things wrong, and they're getting some things wrong, if we're at least talking about how a phone can totally disrupt their workday, can disrupt their relationships with friends and family, then all of a sudden they're thinking about it. Because one thing Ann and I realized a few years ago is that our job is not to raise good kids, because the definition of a good kid is you don't get in trouble, you don't cause us any trouble. But what we realize is that just means you're immersed in your technology. So therefore, it seems like you're a good kid because you're not causing any trouble. The problem is our job is not to raise good kids. Our job is to raise good adults. Adults, it's so funny, Bobby. I got to tell this story. Our 18-year-old asked us today at the dinner table, we're having a family meeting, and he says, so am I a bachelor? And we said, well, let's think about this. The definition of a bachelor is you live on your own and you pay your own bills. And he goes, Oh.
No.
Not a bachelor.
Don't want anything.
Not a bachelor.
No.
Not ready to be a
Not
bachelor.
ready.
But what a powerful conversation to have, because in his mind he's thinking, am I a bachelor? So these kids are thinking, I got this piece of technology. They don't understand that it may cost $100 a month to have this piece of technology. And they don't understand that in a job, they may lose their job from spending too much time on technology. So all of that starts to come into play when you really look at the big picture of this piece of technology you're setting in your kids' hands. And if it becomes a point of conversation, then I say you're doing something right. If it becomes a babysitter, you're doing something wrong.
Absolutely. Well, in Families That Win, we have a bonus section that covers technology and the technology contracts. You talked about that. We also have a technology piece that describes a couple of the different apps that parents can get to monitor it. In today's world of rights versus privileges, and a lot of children feeling that the phone is a privilege that they get, bringing them back to the understanding that it's a right, how are your children responding to your obligation to them to monitor those devices the way you are?
Well, I think it varies. Again, remember, our kids got started before really we understood what it is we were putting in their hands. And so I think some of them, once we started putting some things in place, they were like, what's going on? This is not fair. Where's this coming from? Mm-hmm. And so ignorance can be bliss.
Absolutely.
And we lived in ignorance for a few years. And so we're finally catching up. And hopefully we're not catching up too late. But I'm not going to lie to you, it hasn't been easy because we didn't have those rules and restrictions. And so as we're putting them on, it seems unfair, it seems unreasonable, it seems like we don't know what we're talking about, we don't know what we're doing. And so, and in some ways we're learning on the fly, but we are learning and we are evolving and we are changing. And that's part of what our role is. But the biggest thing we are doing is we are really trying to make it clear that a technology, a computer that you can hold in your hand, is definitely not a privilege. It's definitely not something that you are owed. It's definitely a huge responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I think that's maybe the number one thing we want our kids to learn right now is our kids are leaving the home. Like in the next year, and we got multiple kids that are leaving the home. Every year from here forward, we got somebody leaving the home. And if they can at least leave and know this is a big responsibility. Having a phone is expensive and it's a big responsibility, then we've done something right, in that equation, because that's the reality they're going to face really soon. And so our advice to parents today is instill that early on. Make sure they know that this is not a phone. This is a responsibility. It's a big responsibility. And if they're not ready for it, be prepared not to offer it. Take it off the table.
That's great advice, Mark. We know that psychologists will tell us that having technology in the children's hands, it can change personality, it can change behaviors, it can change moods. Have you seen with your children having technology that it's caused any harm to your children or to your family?
I got to say that I'm just going to put our family out there and say that, and this is just a topic that Ann and I are really passionate about, and that is there's content online that kids shouldn't see.
Yeah.
And sadly, you can't unsee it. And so, the fact is that when they see it, then you got to deal with it because they can't unsee it. And you can't pretend they haven't seen it. So we've been impacted by that. We've had experiences where some of our kids have seen content that wasn't age appropriate. And even though we've got filters, that filter out this stuff, but there are people that are smarter than the filters. And they can get behind that and put content on there. And so, so we've had some of those situations and that's tough. And it causes some heartache and headache. We've also had experiences where a child doesn't get what they want from us. They get a no. know this is not right. But then, as Ann said, they retreat to this world that they've created on their phone, and they get that world to validate them. Now you've got this great internal conflict between mom and dad and this online, social media, virtual world who says, I'm right and we're wrong. You know, historically, 100 years ago or 50 years ago, 20 years ago, if there was a conflict between mom and dad and a child, you kind of had to resolve it between mom and dad and the child. Now it's mom and dad, the child, and this other world. And if you're not plugged into that world, you don't even know that they're getting validated. You don't even know what's happening. And so we've seen that as well. We've seen that personality change where they get this kind of bravado from this other world, and they bring it into the reality world, which is our family. And man, it can really be sticky at times. Wouldn't you say?
I would absolutely say that. I've even seen recently, one of our kids had a phone, and we were just getting a lot of attitude and not cooperating and not participating and not helping in the family at all. And a few days without a phone, and they were polite, you know, can I help you? But, and not just because they wanted their phone back, but really they were in touch with the world and their surroundings and their family, and what a difference it makes in their attitude, in their personality. As you said, they just become a different person.
They do.
You know, it's to all the families listening, when you take a child's phone away that's had a phone for a long time, there is a withdrawal period. But I'm here to tell you, it usually lasts hours, not days. And once that withdrawal period is over and they start plugging into your world again, they realize that you love them. Yes. They realize they have siblings, if they have siblings. They realize that there's games to be played. There's other things that they can do with their time. And so, you know, so I give Ann credit for, you know, taking those steps, because it wasn't just, I need my phone. It was like, wow, I'm awake to the reality of my family.
You two have a unique opportunity to speak to our members tonight in our community. You have experienced a gamut of age differences. Even though you have 6 teenagers, you have them at the top of the scale, down towards the bottom of the scale. With that being said, when we look at the role that technology plays in our kids' lives, and will continue to pray for the rest of their lives, you can look back at your 18 and 19-year-olds down to your 13 and 14-year-olds and say, now, if I had to start this all over again, what advice could I give to the community that I would do differently?
Wait.
Yeah, wait.
Just say no.
Just say no.
Just say no.
10 was way too early.
10 was too early. You know, in fact, we have a lot of kids. Okay, it doesn't matter if you have 1 kid or 6 kids or 16 kids. Really, the decision should have been made based on where the child was at. There's no magic number. So if I were to give any advice, and looking back, it would be wait as long as you can. I mean, we've got a child right now that can't even find her phone 90% of the time. I mean, we could have waited till she was 13, 14 years old, and she'd have been fine with it. So we handed her a phone at 10, and then after 10 times of looking for her phone, that probably should have told us
she wasn't
ready for a phone.
No, I actually think 15, 16 is a much better age. They're through puberty, they're through all the emotions. I also think another idea that we had and we've used for our kids that don't normally have a phone is a family phone. And it's not an iPhone, it's a flip phone. And if they are to go out of town, or if they spend the night at a friend's house, if they're on a school trip, we give them that phone. And that's what they're allowed to use in order to contact us. But they don't need an iPhone. So I would even say, if you're going to give your kid an iPhone, they don't need a phone. They don't need the iPhone. The purpose is to communicate with you. So a flip phone, a regular phone, is enough.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think That probably is the singular idea beyond just waiting that we would go back and implement. Even if we went to the iPhone route, still could be a family phone. Still could be a family phone, because as we found recently, flip phones are actually kind of hard to get. But the family phone idea, do you know what that accomplishes? Not only does it get rid of the entitlement and the right to have a phone idea, but it accomplishes the fact that we embrace the fact that our kids need to get in touch with us when they're away from us, and we need to get in touch with them. But it also gets rid of the whole privacy and community that we don't know exists. Because if you've got a family phone, you can't create this alternate universe of reality, because your sibling is going to have that phone tomorrow. And they're going to see this community you've created, and we want our family community to be our family community. So I love Ann's idea, and I love the idea that if we were to go back and do anything over again, it would be when they hit an age where we felt that a phone was necessary, it would be a family phone. And that we wouldn't move to a phone that was yours until they were past puberty and getting ready to drive. And we do agree that driving does bring on a whole new level of responsibility. As we've seen in our family recently, having that phone at the point of driving is probably the right age maturity-wise and just responsibility-wise to have your own phone. But prior to that, I think a family phone would have accomplished anything we needed a phone in our family for, or our kids needed a phone for.
You know, Mark and Ann, that's not something we hear of very often, the idea of a family phone. But I really like where you're going with that, and that's something that maybe on another coaching call we go deeper in. Right now, I'm seeing some positives to this, such as if you have one phone, and you talked about driving, and it's a flip phone, makes it difficult to text. So that brings up a lot of really neat points to talk about and dive in deeper. But my question to you is, when you look back and you say, okay, maybe we go to a family phone on that pattern, in that direction, and kids at different age can get on some type of sign-up sheet of when they check out the phone, when they're going to do their things. What about in today's society that says you have to be connected with Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, Facebook? The child is no longer accepted by their community if they're not connected. What advice would you give parents with that?
I would say that, because here's the deal. All of these things you just talked about, we have seen our kids go through them as fads. They come and go, come and go, come and go. We were talking today about how one of our kids that was like all about Instagram last year, I checked her phone this week. Okay, so I was in her phone this week. She doesn't even use it. Okay, so these things are just fads, all right? They're just fads. And right now, what I'm seeing is what's new is old and what's old is new. And I think parents have an opportunity to actually position their kids in a really positive light in saying, you know what, we don't have that kind of access, you know, and this is what we do instead. We play cards, or we play this or that. And I know 10 years ago that might have been, you know, really looked down upon, but I think parents would find today that it's refreshing. I think a kid goes home and says, oh, you can't believe the Timm kids, they don't have phones. Not a single parent is going to say, oh, that's a dumb idea. They're all going to be going, how do we drink some of that Kool-Aid?
I'm with you.
And that's the truth, because I think most parents feel stuck. And we felt stuck for a long time, saying, oh my gosh, we've made a mistake, but we can't undo it. And so parents today have a chance to not make that mistake. And so they have a chance to say, no, this is not healthy. These social media groups or whatever, until the child is mature enough and wise enough to handle that, I mean, why would you do that? And why did we do that? You know, we get the chance to claim ignorance because we didn't know, because it was brand new. Now we know.
It's true.
And now families know. And we want to empower families to be able to say no, and to be able to say no with conviction and know why they're saying no. And I think they'll be surprised at the kids saying, thank you. Man, that takes a lot of pressure off. You're now the bad guy, And I don't have the responsibility of monitoring all this technology and being bullied by all these people online and being caught in all this mess. I get to just be 13.
Nice.
And 13 is not easy.
No.
It's not.
Mix all that stuff into it, it's nearly impossible.
I agree. Well, we're going to have a little fun now. I have a list of 5 commandments, if you will, for parents who allow their children access to personal technology devices. As I read each one of these, I invite you to respond with any thoughts that you might have. So I'm simply going to give the commandment, and I would like to solicit your response.
All right.
The first one is, be an example.
Oh my gosh.
Be an example, honey.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's hard.
It's hard.
It is hard. It's hard for me, but it's even harder for him.
So I've got a funny story to tell. So we decided that we wanted to be an example. So we had a family meeting, and we went on record in front of all of our kids and said, "Here's the deal. We don't want you to be on the phone when it's family time. Not when we're at mealtime, not when we're having family meetings, when we're having engaging conversations. We don't want you to be on the phone. And in fact, we're going to go so far as to say we don't want to be on the phone. We want to be an example for you. So we're going to empower you to hold us accountable when we're on the phone when we shouldn't be."
And?
Ouch.
Yeah,
Ouch.
they're good at it.
They're really good at it. I mean, when Grace, our youngest, we still put her to bed. And when I come in there to put her to bed, sometimes I'm not finished with something I think is important. And I'm looking at my phone and she takes it.
Nice.
And it's embarrassing. Or she'll say something like, "Hey, isn't this my time?" And then I'll get up and I'll go put my phone in the kitchen so I can focus on her. And so, you've got some examples too, right?
I do. And sometimes I'm responding to text messages, and one of the kids is trying to ask me a question, and they're like, "Mom, hello. Can you get off your phone and be here in the moment?" And it is an ouch. It really is.
We had a guest in the house. We had actually a family in the house with us this last weekend, and the father was having a conversation with me at the table, and all the kids were around, and they were interested in the conversation because they're just, kind of nosy a little bit. We're having this conversation and everything, and he is finding things on the phone or doing something on the phone or communicating or whatever. And his 16-year-old daughter looks at him and goes, "Dad, put the phone away and have a conversation with Mr. Mark."
Nice.
Oh my gosh. He was like, totally just caught and shut the phone off, pushed it forward, and was like, "I'm sorry." But it happened so naturally. And so we get frustrated with our kids, but what are we doing? So my advice would be, as painful as it was for us, the most powerful thing we've done is empower our kids to hold us accountable, because it allows us to be the example that we want to be, even if it hurts, even if it's embarrassing. But if we wouldn't have empowered them as the parent, I'm not sure Grace would say anything. I'm not sure some of the kids would say anything if we didn't give them the green light to say, hold us accountable. So it's not enough, in my opinion, Bobby, to be an example. You got to be an example and then tell the kids that you want to be an example and let them hold you accountable for it.
All right, the second commandment, be intentional.
You know what comes to mind for me is know your why. Why did you give them a phone to begin with? Better yet, why do they need a phone? Better yet, why do you need a phone? If you don't know your why, if you don't know why you need a phone, like I know why I need a phone, and it's not so I can check emails when I'm putting Grace to bed. It's not why. That is not why I need a phone. So therefore, when she holds me accountable for that, it's awesome because that's not why I need a phone. So if I know my why, then we probably should reach out to them and know their why. Because when they say, I need a phone, and the only answer is because my friend has a phone or everybody else has a phone, I don't think there's any parent out there that's going to say, that's a great reason. So Ann talked about having a phone when they were 15 or 16. Now all of a sudden, they're starting to take on real responsibility. Mm-hmm. They've got real activities they're in. They're away from home more. They're starting to drive. That's a why that I think any parent could say, yeah, I'm seeing that. Yeah. But it helps, I think, and I think it helps with the age, and it helps with a lot of things. But I think the biggest thing is, this is my opinion, and I want to know what you think about it. I think being intentional is all about the parents really thinking this through. Like really thinking through, discussing, planning, how are we going to monitor it? How are we going to deal with it? And what's our plan for equipping them to be responsible? Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, being, intentional is all about the parents being responsible and taking the time to think about it and know their why.
Yeah, absolutely. You start with the why, and then when you make that decision to hand them the phone, there's steps, there's thoughts that you need to
there's
discuss.
A contract.
There's, a contract. Are they going to help pay for it? When are they going to be allowed to have it? Is it all the time? Is it during certain hours? What about an app that monitors the activity? Yeah, it's thinking through all of those things and putting the steps in place before handing the phone to them and knowing what you're going to do when they have it. What steps do you have to revoke it? What steps do you have to be able to say, hey, let me see your phone. I'm going to look at it.
I think most of ours just happened. And I want to empower families not to just happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't let technology just happen.
Yeah, if you're not intentional, it does just happen to your family. I agree. Well, thank you. That was a great response. Let's get our next one. And you kind of touched on it, Ann. We can go a little deeper with that, I believe, that's being proactive. She kind of touched on that when she's talking about planning and the apps and monitoring. So tell me a little bit what you feel when you hear the words be proactive, commandment number 3.
Being proactive, like we were saying, is first thinking it through, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, how are you going to monitor, talking to your kids about it, but then taking those steps, doing the research on the apps, putting them on the phones, talking to your kids about the apps and what they do, both for you and for them. There's a lot of steps, I think.
One of the things we did during a really critical period of time for our kids is that our kids didn't have the password to add an app, which meant that we had to put in the password to add the app, which meant we got to have a conversation. And so I think that's the proactive part, is anticipate the issues. Anticipate the fact that we are not going to know what they know. So when they come to us and say, can I put this app on my phone? Okay, this is one thing I want to give Ann credit for. She'll say, let me look at it. And then she'll go online, she'll plug the app into Google and say, what should a parent know about this?
Absolutely.
Good.
And then all of a sudden it's like, no, not happening.
We're not downloading that app.
No, and I even show them. I say, do you see what this says?
Could you come over here
Do you
and read
really
this?
think you want this? No.
Because I don't have my glasses on.
Yeah.
Could you read this? And so, and then sometimes it's like, that sounds good. I hope you're going to use the features of this because it's a really good feature. So, but here's what it goes back to for me. What I hear when I say be proactive is, number one, anticipate possible issues, because kind of what the issues are going to be now, at least parents should. But the biggest thing of all is talk. Use it as a conversation point, especially if you've got teenagers. So many parents come to us when we're coaching families, when we're talking to families on live, and they say, my teenager won't talk to me. Well, guess what? They'll talk to you about their phone. They'll talk to you about access to their phone. They'll talk to you about the app that they want. They'll talk to you about a lot of things if you'll be proactive and set up the right hurdles for them to cross over to be able to get access to something they want. Just like Ann said, you take away their phone, it doesn't take very long before all of a sudden their attitude changes. So be proactive, use it as a talking point. It's powerful.
Excellent. Good advice. Now, we know that technology changes. We also know that kids are different one from another, maturity-wise, learning-wise, and kids change as we go through the different generations and ages. So when you hear the fourth commandment, tell me how this strikes you when I say, be flexible.
The rule we had that every kid got a phone at 10 years old was one of the poorest thought out things that we've done as parents. That kids are different. They handle responsibility different. They mature different at different ages. And I think as parents, you've got to be flexible. You got to understand your kids well enough to meet them where they're at and understand when they can handle this kind of responsibility, when they're ready for this kind of responsibility, and when they're not. And don't have some one-size-fits-all mentality when it comes to technology, because it doesn't work that way. We've got kids that can handle technology. We've got kids that can't handle technology. It's up to us to know the difference. And to say we don't know the difference means we're asleep at the wheel. And we can't be asleep at the wheel as parents. They count on us too much. They need us to not be asleep at the wheel. And I know we've seen recently as our kids get older, some of them are just waiting for us to call them out. They're asking for us to be parents. They're asking for us to do our job. And sometimes we think, oh, well, we can't do it, it might ruffle feathers, or they may not like that. But you know what? They're testing us. Do you have what it takes to lead me to be an adult? If so, do your job. And the job as parents sometimes is to say no to one child and say yes to another, because one child's ready and one child's not. And that's what be flexible means to me.
And times change as well. So you're flexible with your kids, but you have to be flexible to the moments, the situations, the things that change on the phone. Because goodness, that seems like it's daily. So being flexible is kind of knowing what's happening and being able to move with it.
Well, as we kind of wrap up here tonight, you've given incredible advice to our Thrive community. I would like to give each of you an opportunity to maybe add to our list or speak about something that you really feel passionate about when it comes to your children and technology that you would like to share with our group.
I know what I would say. I would say if I could do anything over again, I would learn from the mistakes of other people. Like us. Learn from our mistakes. Please don't make these same mistakes. Don't make these same mistakes. There are so many families out there, and that's the beauty of being involved with Thrive. That's the beauty of being involved with Ziglar Family, is that there are other families who have made these same mistakes. Learn from them. I mean, do your homework. Most families listening to this don't have the luxury of saying, I don't know what I don't know. Because smartphones have been out now for a while and almost a decade. And so now we know they can be really harmful or really a positive thing. But man, learn from other people's mistakes. Don't make those same mistakes.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also say to don't rush, be patient.
Love that.
Do your research, like Mark said, before you hand a kid the phone, figure out your why and take those steps to be proactive.
Know your
intentional.
why. Know why you have it and know why they should have it. And if they don't know why they should have it, they're not ready to have it.
This is great advice, guys, and I love the know your why. That's an outstanding one. Well, Mark and Ann, thank you so much for your time with us tonight. I appreciate all your great advice.